Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be talking about the hack and slash side-scroller Shank by Klei Entertainment, which you probably know from things like Mark of the Ninja, Don't Starve Together, Oxygen Not Included. They've done a bunch of different games. Their games are pretty iconic for their art styles, and as my continuous story of playing through a ton of backlog games goes, I am trying to work through a lot of things, and Shank was on the docket this time. It's not a very long game, 20 levels, which are about anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes each, I would say. And Shank is essentially like I said, it's a run, shoot and stab, very cartoony, very stylized game that has you playing as the character Shank as you work your way through a mob and murder all the heads of the mob, basically. The game is very fast-paced. It relies on a classic sort of light, heavy type side-and scrolling action thing, along with a gun of various types, and it's a fairly competent game. What I kind of like about it is that Klei have, like I said, they have a very particular style, and where I played Mark of the Ninja, that's like my favourite game by them. The Shank and Shank 2 both preceded it, and it sort of sets up that style that they're known for. The game itself is, like I said, it's very fast-paced. It kind of has these nice different locales that you're at. You have, like, you're doing a classic. You're on a train, fighting dudes. You're on different buildings. You're in, like, a vineyard. I think it looks, at least it feels like a vineyard. You're in, like, a cellar. Like, there's different areas that you go to. And all in all, it's a very to-the-point game. It feels like a game that was designed for Xbox Live. It's almost got like that menu type, you know, very short experience, probably about 10 hours at most, if that. You can probably do it in about 5, but if you're playing it a bit, yeah, it's probably 5 and 8 hours of just crazy action. So, the big thing with this game is that you have your standard knives, which are your light attacks. You have your heavy attack, which can be a chainsaw, a katana. It can be some chains around your hands. They all add to different abilities, and they all work slightly different, but they are your heavy attacks. And you have different guns. You have pistols, you have Uzi, and you have a shotgun. And again, they all have their differences, and you can change them on the fly. And the idea is you're trying to combo together as many attacks as possible. You can also grab and pounce on people, and that gives you sort of different attacks. And the one thing I will say that's very different between this and a lot of other type of brawlers is this is a one-lane style game. This isn't like something like a Streets of Rage where you can move back and forth from the foreground to the background. You are fighting on one lane, essentially like it is a platformer, and that definitely makes for a challenge, for sure. And this game is very challenging, I find. The different enemy types will have melee weapons, they'll chuck grenades, they'll have pistols, they'll have guns. You'll get bigger brute type enemies that will flash when they're going to do a big strong attack. You can also block and dodge. You can like sort of dodge through them. The enemy can dodge away from you. The game's very competent in what it does, and it definitely leads to you having to think about what enemies are on screen, how they react. Like any kind of brawler, like different enemies do different things. You're going to prioritize the ones that are probably the biggest threat. And grabbing a lot of enemies, and sort of like when you're dunking on them and stuff, the other enemies will leave you alone, so you do get a little bit of a reprieve if you're going in for grabs. There's a good core combat system here that I think really shines in this game, and it's one of the best things about it. Like I said before, Klei are known for their art styles, and I think that's one of the biggest things about this game. Is the art style pops. It's very good. It's very colourful. It's got that kind of cel-shaded cartoon look to it. The animations in this game are also really cool. If you watch when Shank grabs someone and like pick them up and like stab them a few times and smash their heads on the ground, it's very well animated. The same with some of the boss fights. When you get these canned animations, they always look really good. Like this one where you get picked up, slammed on, and then shot in the face by like the final boss, for example. And again, looks very good. One of the best things about the game is just how it looks, how it's presented, and like I said, the animations that you get with it. Feels very impactful. A lot of the weapons, like for example the chainsaw, you get the ring sort of sound as you're revving it up as you're using it, and it like hit multiple times. Very, very, very impactful. The chains feel the most impactful, I find, because they're very heavy. So when you hit someone, you get a nice whack sound, and it's like you see the enemies go flying. It's kind of a stabby sound with the normal Shank knife that you're using, which is a much lighter attack. And then obviously the guns sound good. If you fire the shotgun, it's like boom every time it goes off. The cool thing is with the guns, you've got like 360 degree in terms of like you can aim it up, down, left, right, and diagonals. You've got the Uzi, which is more crowd control. You've got the shotgun, which is like good for hitting the heavy guys, and then the pistols are good for single target. And that's probably the best thing about the game. So you've got the look of the game, because it's quite a simple game. It's not trying to be anything different. You've got the look of the game, and you've got the combat, and those are the things that are going to stand out. The big problem with this game is because it is a one-lane system. The way that difficulty in this game is, it can feel incredibly unfair at points. Now, I just want to say that I enjoyed the game. Love the art style, love the gameplay. There isn't much wrong with this game. It's purely based on all around the difficulty of this game, and that comes in different shapes and sizes depending on what you're doing. There is a little bit of platforming in the game, and for the most part it's straightforward, but later on it becomes a bit more difficult. There's a level where you're in like it's either a cellar or like a mine shaft, and you are trying to escape said thing. Now, it is the first time that you come into sort of contact with falling objects while you're trying to swing, run along walls, climb pipes, all that sort of stuff. And the game doesn't do a very good job, and this is with combat as well. It's like sometimes giving you enough time to react to things that are you need to dodge. Now, with the environmental sort of hazards on this particular level, I think I just got lucky and managed to get through it. I died so many times getting hit by this rock that was falling. I was like, I have no idea how to handle it, but managed to just sort of wing it. There's other things. There's a level where there's rockets flying around and they're random, and they can end up just hitting you and doing a ton of damage. And it just sort of felt like a lot of the environment puzzles or the environment dangers you had to deal with, you got much later on in the game, so the last sort of 4 to 5 levels, and it wasn't that easy to recognise what was going on. And if you guys know me, I'm not a big fan of games. So you should be able to complete a level in one life. I'm not saying that you will do it, because the likelihood is it's going to be challenging, but you should find it fair. And I think this game does a really bad job. Like, I think the difficulty spikes in it aren't particularly fair, and I think the environmental puzzles on the last few levels are very, 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 like, I get what they're going for, but they go against everything. Like, they're not fair at all. I think they're really badly designed. And that brings on the difficulty with the enemy types. Now, you have a lot of tools at your disposal, so you can learn how to deal with enemies, but I will say ranged enemies, they're usually the thing that you've got to deal with. Later on in the game, you get people with automatic guns that will spread the 3 or 4 bullets are going across the screen, and you have to block it or dodge it. They become incredibly hard to deal with depending on what other enemy types you get. Some of the big brutes can have big weapons like a minigun or a grenade launcher. Some of them will run back and forth on the screen. And there are just moments of this game where you just get the worst combination of enemies, and it just feels like you get absolutely destroyed because you just don't know how to handle. They all kind of attack. You could be wailing on one enemy while the other 3 enemies could all be attacking you at the same time. There's no way of avoiding that, and what that can lead to is juggle situations where you get smacked in a corner, shot, slammed about 4 or 5 times before you bounce off the wall and fly away from them. And it's moments like that where I go, this isn't particularly well balanced. Like, this is okay if you're a human player doing it to AI, but as soon as you take that control away from the player and leave them stun locked essentially, that's not fun. And if you combine some of those platforming parts, and you combine some of these parts with the enemy types and the way that certain enemies work, there are moments in this game where I look at this and go, you know what, maybe this was the first Shank. I haven't played the second one. Maybe in this first game there is this level of like unpolished sort of dealing with mobs of enemies and unfair difficulty. I'm not saying that the game is like easy or hard. I think the game for the most part has you learning what characters do, but there are times when there's one too many enemies on screen, or there's just a certain type combination of enemies where you're like, well, I've got to deal with this guy, but I'm just getting shot in the back constantly, and the game's trying to get you to like use everything at your disposal, but it is a bit too manic. This game's pretty quick, so it's a bit too manic to sometimes deal with it, and you just kind of have to hope. You do get grenades, which are kind of like your get out of jail free card, where you just chuck it and it just blows up everything on screen. But you only get limited to 3 of them, and they're better for like the big enemies if you want to get rid of them quickly. It's just one of those things that's unfortunate, because most of the different enemy types on their own have their own kind of like, this is how they work, and you're like, right, if there's a gun, someone with a gun, get on top of them, juggle them a few times, grab them, chuck them into somebody else. If it's the melee guys, you just kind of have to block or dodge, because the dodge in there as well. But as soon as there's like 6 enemies on screen, it does get a bit, which is probably like the most you'll ever deal with. Usually you kill one, somebody else jumps in. It does just get a bit hectic. In terms of some of the platforming stuff as well, that I should have mentioned is that sometimes you would just over jump. Like if you're going to grab hold of something and swing on it, you just over jump. Like the controls on some of the wall running and wall climbing stuff aren't quite where they need to be. It's only again like the later challenges, they just haven't quite. It was like ironed them out. But all in all, like Shank is a really, I don't want to say basic. It's not basic. It's a really small, compact game that knows what it wants to be, and I think it does for the most part a really good job of that. It's just, you can see that if it was me that was doing it, I would probably go back and fine tune a few things and look at like, okay, how do people deal with these encounters? There was one bit on the very last level where you have to try and slide down a pipe, jump on something and flip over, and there's a guy with a gun there, and if you don't do that correctly, you'll just fall down the hole because they'll shoot you off the swinging thing, or if you try to attack him, you'll fall down the hole. It was like, and I died about 4 or 5 times there, and it kind of was like, this doesn't feel like it's well thought through. And the answer was just to jump through and get shot, and it was like, okay, that was a choice, very, very odd, but ultimately, I think the game 80% of the time does a good job. There's a good 10% there of just what feels like utter shite, because you're dealing with things you haven't seen before or situations that you haven't come across before, and the game just expects you to just be like, yep, see how you go, and it's like, well, there's no setup here. Like I should be able to do that, and there in some cases there is with some enemies and things like that. There is. And I know there's obviously potentially a bit of a skill issue, like, you know, it's me learning as well, but there are definitely points in this game that feel unfair or feel like the platforming just suddenly took a bit of a spike in terms of difficulty. I don't know why it did, but it does. But yeah, that's Shank in a nutshell. Hopefully the gameplay on screen will reinforce everything that I'm saying anyway. Shank is a really nice small game. Klei are a good company. They make good games. I understand this is probably like one of their bigger. This is one of the games that got them rolling. I'm looking forward to playing the second game. I want to see if the second game is just as good, if it improves on things, which you'll see. But hopefully for you guys, this is just a quick look, quick sort of thoughts on the original Shank, and sort of seeing like where it is, what it does, and all that good stuff. Basically, it's a good game with some poor moments of difficulty spikes that just feel unfair, basically. Anyway, that's going to do it for me today then, guys. Thank you very much for watching as always. If you liked the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, hit the subscribe button. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.